And here I am. How are we doing, awesomes? Welcome to week 7. Apologies for the tardiness here. Some between computer issues and other other personal matters that come up over the last 4 or 5 days. I have a little behind here, so my sincerest apologies. So let's dive right in here. So thinking and hoping that you have already perhaps started to take a look at this, right? Looked at what an annotation is, what they kind of look like, right? There's an example, and then of course, entering the conversation. So hopefully, now that you've looked at that stuff, maybe what I'm going to say will make a little bit more sense. So essentially, each one of your bibliographic entries, or the fancy way of just saying each one of your sources, right? So if you take your references page, right, in APA format, and you list out your 7 in alphabetical order, okay, that's a bibliography. The annotation, the annotated portion of the bibliography, takes it a step further and says, okay, here are the 7 sources. Now, underneath each source, I want you to write 3 paragraphs, right? To really get to let's dive into the sources a little bit instead of just listing them, okay? So under each one of your sources, right? So you've got your 7 listed on your references page, let's say. So the first one, hit your enter button, right? And then type 3 paragraphs, right? The first paragraph will summarize the source, okay? The main arguments especially, right? What is the point of this book or article? What topics are being covered? Kind of think about these questions as guiding questions to help you think about summary. I know we've all done summaries, but then there's an assessment, right? How useful is the source? How does it compare with other sources in your bibliography? Is the information reliable? Is the source biased or objective? What is the goal of this source? Okay, obviously, since we're talking about conversations, the biggest question I really want you to focus on when it comes to your assessment paragraph is, how does it compare with the other sources in your bibliography? Okay. Not that you can't address the reliability of the information, because that may be an issue if you're looking at how they connect to each other. That is totally fine, but make sure you address for sure how it compares. And then finally, your third paragraph will be a reflection paragraph, right? And this is where you will kind of talk about its relevance, right? In the sense of shaping your argument. What's it kind of going to do, right? You've kind of told us what the source says in your summary, how it compares to other sources, right? Now we're going to kind of talk about more specifically, kind of like think about answering this question. Where is it going to show up, and in what capacity do you see it showing up in your paper, right? Oh, this source here, as I reflect on it, is going to be used to help me support X argument. Does that make sense? Right? Or this is going to help me with support the background information that there is a problem to begin with. Could be that, right? This is going to help me when it comes to deciding that, at the end of my paper, I really want to make a recommendation to address this problem, right? And this is going to be one of the sources I use for that. Okay. So those are the kind of things you can be thinking about for your, your reflection paragraph. So that is kind of what I mean. Of course, obviously, you can start writing if you want to. I prefer if you kind of just use these before you actually start writing your paper, because we want to be thinking about how do these connect to each other, right? So that's what the reason for the map is, to kind of help us really think about before we sit down and write the annotated bibliography. Yeah, you obviously make notes, and you can obviously do some, sketching and scribbling around and all these kind of things. That's totally fine. Because to help you really, right, when we think about how do these compare, or how am I going to use it, right? This mapping activity really, really helps us do that, okay? So I'm sure perhaps that you've read let me keep the map, keep that on, okay. You've looked at the sources map, okay? And then we've also looked at these, I don't know why I have to do this on this computer, so just bear with me. How to do it, right? These 9 steps, if you will, right? So basically, what I really want you to be concentrating and focusing on is this part right here. All right, 2 sources, source 1 and source 2. those are your launch text, right? Those are your really super duper, oh my God, these are the best and most awesomest sources I've ever had, and they are so integral to my paper. Then you've got, I don't want to say secondary sources, but you have your other sources, right? And they're going to connect in some way to each other or around. So for me to I probably should start by just explaining convergence and divergence, right? Are the two sources converging in the sense that they're both kind of saying the same thing, right? Now they may be coming at it from different angles, right? But they're still kind of going this direction, right? Now you also may have a source where they're kind of like this, but then they kind of start to diverge. It's kind of still talking about the same thing. Maybe this one goes in a particular direction of a solution that is antithetical to source 4, right? Source 3 and source 4, maybe they're going like this a little bit, but they're still in the conversation. Maybe they are converging a little bit. maybe as a result of this too, what I want us to think about too is if we think about convergence versus divergence are our sources, or is the source still in the same vein? That's kind of what this mapping exercise helps us do, because we may find that when we look at our sources, that source 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, they're all diverging and they're not staying in the conversation. All right. So this exercise helps us think about that. At least take a critical look. All right. Because it's one thing to look at our 7 sources and assume just by the title, right, that they must, because of the title, they all must be talking about the same thing, right? And at this stage in the game, it's easy to make that assumption. So this just causes us to kind of stop for a second, really take a deep dive, okay? Now, most of these, finding your scholarly sources, most of these should have a really good abstract to help you compare. Maybe even just starting with comparing abstract, maybe look at a couple of the results sections, maybe a little bit of the methods, depending on what your topic is, right? Whatever is most important for you to look at so that you really understand the source so you can do the mapping. And then as you're starting to do that, as I put my map together and I think I have an understanding of where my sources are, then I start to work on my annotated bibliography, and I start with my 2 main sources, right? My 2 launch texts. Make sure I understand that relationship between these 2, and then start with the next one, making sure then as you're putting it together, you make sure that you are staying within that conversation. That's what this sources map essentially helps us do, okay? So that's the reason for the activity. It's kind of some use it as a pre-activity. I kind of use it a also you can kind of do it, as you're writing it, as you're actually writing your actual annotated bibliography, you're kind of putting your map together at the same time. Okay, so let's take a quick look. So mapping your sources, right? That'll be for this discussion posts number 2, sources map. And so let me just clarify one quick thing. You don't have, if your map if you don't use an app, the app I'm using there, or the program or the website or whatever you want to call it, I'm using there is Canva, Canva.com, Canva.com. If you don't want to do that, feel free to do it the old-fashioned way, okay? When I do this in class live, everyone has literally a piece of paper like this, okay? And they will write there, okay? So we got text 1, text 2, and then we'll have these circles, and then they will write their stuff out and make notes, and it could end up looking something like this, only legibly written, okay? And then take a picture of that with your phone or whatever, and then you can upload that. As long as I can read it, okay? As long as I can make sense, okay? Not in Corey scribble, okay? As long as I can make sense of it, you will be good, okay? All right, and then, of course, there's that sample here that you can look at. How it's listed. You just pretend you have a bibliography, an APA reference entry, followed by 3 paragraphs. Okay. Then whatever your next entry is, right, in alphabetical order, that 3 paragraphs, next entry, 3 paragraphs, and so forth and so on until you're done. I don't say it's that straightforward, but it really is. So this weekend we'll look at our sources maps, and we'll have fun with that. So All right, guys, I know I've blathered on way too long, perhaps, but I wanted to get this information to you sooner rather than later. And I apologize that it was the latter in the later department. All right, guys, enjoy the rest of your week. If there's anything I can do for you, let me know. And then we will take it from there. I know several of you have been emailing me saying I've already revised Project One and putting that in there. So thank you for letting me know. I usually check the when you resubmit. I'll check those every once in a while too, and I will stay on top of those as quickly as possible.